Sometimes love turns into obsession. Sometimes truth becomes a lie. This is Confessdark, where secrets speak in the dark. The house held its breath whenever she was gone. It was a silence I had grown accustomed to, a hollow echo in the spaces she was supposed to fill. But tonight, the silence felt different. It felt heavier, colder, like it knew something I didn't. I stood by the window, watching the rain wash over the city. Each drop, a tiny explosion of light on the glass. The city was alive out there, a million stories unfolding under the bruised purple sky. But in here, there was only one story, and it was a ghost story. The ghost of what we used to be. The sound of my own heartbeat was a slow, heavy drum in the quiet. Thump, thump, a rhythm of waiting. I drifted through the rooms we built together. Now just a museum of our shared past. Her side of the bed was cold, the sheets unnaturally smooth. I walked past her vanity, a place that always smelled of her, lilac and vanilla. But tonight, another scent lingered in the air, faint but sharp. It wasn't another perfume. It was the smell of damp earth, of cold, outdoor air, and something else I couldn't place. Something that smelled like a secret. My fingers traced the edge of the polished wood, searching for a clue I hoped I wouldn't find. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't the scent that gave her away, not really. It was what the scent clung to, a small object, left behind by mistake. An object that had no place in our life, and one that would soon become the first clue in the dismantling of everything I held sacred. It was a key, small, brass, and old. It was tucked under a stack of unopened mail on the console by the door, almost completely hidden. I'd never seen it before. It wasn't for our house, or our cars, or the office. The small metal tag attached to it was stamped with a 3-digit number, 317. It felt cold in my palm, heavy, with a purpose I didn't understand. A key is a promise of something locked away, a door to be opened, or a part of a life you were never meant to see. Where did this key belong? I placed the key on the kitchen counter, a tiny golden accusation on the cold, white marble. Then the ritual began. The waiting. The clock on the wall wasn't just ticking seconds away. It was mocking me. Each tick was a question. Where is she? Who is she with? I imagined her laughing, her head tilted back, the way she did when she was truly happy. But the face she was smiling at wasn't mine. The thought was a shard of ice in my gut. This was the 3rd time this month she was working late, but her office always closed at 9. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over her name, Ilara. A name that once felt like a poem in my mouth, now tasted like ash. I could call, I could text, I could demand to know. But what would that make me? The jealous husband? The man who didn't trust the woman he promised his life to? The silence from my phone was louder than any ringtone could be. It was the sound of my own fear. The fear of having my worst suspicions confirmed, of hearing her lie, because a lie would be so much kinder than the truth I was imagining. But what if the lie was all we had left? I decided not to text. Not yet. Because I realized I didn't just want an answer. I wanted evidence. Something undeniable. I didn't know it then, but the evidence I was about to receive wouldn't come from a phone. It would arrive with the sound of the front door opening, and it would change the entire nature of my investigation. At 1:47 a.m., the lock turned. It was a soft sound, a gentle click, but it ripped through the silence of the house like a gunshot. I didn't move from my spot in the darkened living room. I just watched. She slipped inside, a shadow detaching from the deeper shadows of the night. She didn't turn on the lights. She moved with a quiet, practiced stealth, as if she were a burglar in her own home. She thought I was asleep. She was counting on it. She stood there for a long moment, water pooling at her feet, just listening to the darkness. But what was she listening for? When she finally moved into the faint moonlight filtering through the window, I saw her face, and my heart stopped. It wasn't the face of a woman flushed with the excitement of a secret lover. There was no guilt, no hurried passion. There was only a void, an emptiness so vast it seemed to pull all the light in the room into it. Her eyes, when she opened them, weren't looking at anything in the room. They were looking at a memory. She looked like a stranger. A beautiful, tragic stranger I happened to be married to. And I realized the other man I was afraid of wasn't a man at all. It was a ghost. She knelt down beside our bed. From the corner, in the deepest shadow under the frame, she pulled out a small wooden box. It was dark cherry wood, polished by time and touch. I had never seen it before. Another secret, hidden in the most intimate space we shared. Her movements were a quiet ritual. She held the box to her chest for a moment, her eyes closed, as if it were a holy relic or a box of ashes. She didn't open it. She just held it, as if the pain inside was too great to let out. I had to know what was in that box. The box and the key. Two secrets. At the time, I thought they were connected, that the key opened the box. But the truth was far more complex. They were two separate pieces of the same heartbreaking puzzle. And understanding how they fit together would require me to commit a betrayal of my own. The next morning, she was Ilara again. My Ilara. She smiled, made coffee, and talked about a project at work. The void was gone, papered over with the mundane wallpaper of our lives. It was a masterful performance. While she was in the shower, I took the key. The number 317 felt like a brand on my palm. A quick search online confirmed my suspicion. It was a post office box key. The branch was located across town, in a neighborhood we had never visited. A place with no connection to our lives. Or so I thought. I wrote a note. I know you're hiding something, but crumpled it up. An accusation felt like a surrender. No, I would find the truth myself. That afternoon, I called in sick to work. The lie came easily, and the guilt barely registered. I was a man on a mission, a detective in the ruins of my own life. Driving to that post office felt like crossing a border into another country. The rain started again, a relentless, weeping gray that matched the color of my thoughts. Each stoplight, each turn, brought me closer to an answer I was beginning to realize I didn't want. The key swung from the ignition, a tiny, silent pendulum, counting down the moments until my world fell apart. I parked across the street, watching people come and go. I felt like a phantom, watching a life that wasn't mine. Was this what she felt like every time she came here? And then I saw her. Her car, the same sensible sedan she drove every day, pulled up a block away. She got out, head down, hood pulled up against the rain. She moved quickly, her body language tight and anxious. She wasn't the confident woman I knew. She was hunted. She kept looking over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the street. For a moment, her gaze swept past my car, and I ducked, my heart hammering against my ribs. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she didn't recognize the man I had become. The man who spied on his own wife. I watched as she entered the building, my mind racing. What was in that box? Love letters? Money? I was still thinking in such simple terms. I was about to learn that some secrets aren't meant to be hidden from a husband. They're meant to be hidden from the world itself. And what she pulled from that box was not a clue to her present, but an artifact from a past I never knew she had. I watched her go inside. I waited 5 minutes that felt like 5 years, then followed. The air inside was stale, smelling of paper and disinfectant. I saw her at the far wall, a bank of brass doors gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Her back was to me. I saw her hand, steady and sure, insert a key into a lock. Box 317. She opened the small door, reached inside, and pulled out a single, thick manila envelope. She didn't open it. She just clutched it to her chest, the same way she had held the wooden box. Then she turned, and for a terrifying second, our eyes met across the room. Time stopped. In her eyes, I saw nothing. No recognition, not shocked. Just the same hollow sorrow from the night before. It was as if she looked right through me, as if I wasn't there at all. My betrayal, my great clandestine operation, meant nothing. I was invisible to her. She walked past my hiding spot and out the door, the envelope held like a shield against the world. I was left standing in the sterile silence, my suspicion now curdled into a thick, confusing dread. The affair I had imagined felt simple, almost clean compared to this. This was something deeper, something far more broken. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the blankness in her eyes. Maybe it was the need to reclaim some sense of control. I walked out of the post office and directly to a locksmith 2 blocks away. I still had the brass key. I lied again, said I'd lost the spare to my personal P.O. box. The man behind the counter didn't even blink. 10 minutes and $20 later, I had my own copy. A silver, sterile counterfeit key. It felt like a weapon in my hand, an instrument of violation. I had crossed a line, and I knew there was no going back. Holding this counterfeit key, I felt a surge of dark power. The power to unlock her world without her permission. But there's a saying, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. I was about to get everything I asked for, the truth in all its brutal, heartbreaking detail. And it would be delivered not in a letter, through a collection of small, innocent items that would feel sharper than any knife. I waited until the next day. The house was empty. Ilara was at work, living her lie, and I was about to live mine. Returning to the post office felt different this time. I was no longer an observer. I was a participant, a trespasser. My heart was a frantic bird beating against my ribs. My hand shook as I inserted the newly cut key into the lock of box 317. For a moment, I hesitated. This was the point of no return. Opening this door would change everything, forever. I turned the key. The lock gave a soft, metallic sigh, a sound of surrender. I reached inside, my fingers brushing against paper. I pulled out the contents. I was expecting letters, photographs of a man, hotel receipts, the sordid, predictable evidence of an affair. But it was none of those things. It was a birth certificate, a hospital bracelet yellowed with age, a few faded photographs of a woman, a much younger Ilara, holding a newborn baby. And at the very bottom, folded carefully, was a single, tiny, blue wool sock. My breath caught in my throat. The name on the birth certificate wasn't Ilara. It was her maiden name. And the father's name was left blank. Leo. The baby's name was Leo. A name I had never heard. A life I had never known existed. I sat in my car in the post office parking lot. The rain starting to fall again. A gentle tapping on the roof. I looked at the photograph. It was her. Unmistakably Ilara, but she was a girl. Her face was rounder, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fierce, unconditional love as she looked down at the tiny, sleeping child in her arms. This wasn't a secret. This was a whole other life, a life she had lived and buried long before she ever met me. The jealousy that had burned in me for weeks was gone. In its place, a cold, hollowing shame began to spread through my veins. What had I done? As I sat there, the pieces clicking into place, I noticed one more document I'd overlooked, tucked inside the folded birth certificate. It was different from the others. The paper was crisper, more official. It wasn't a memory of a beginning, like a birth certificate. It was a record of the end, and the date on it explained everything. The late nights, the sorrow, the reason for her pilgrimage today. I couldn't stop looking at the child's face. This boy, her son. He had her eyes, I thought. Or maybe I was just imagining it. How many times had she come here, to this soulless place, just to look at these pictures? To hold this single, tiny sock? The wooden box under the bed. It must hold the other one. A matched set. A perfect, heartbreaking pair. The late nights weren't dates. They were pilgrimages. The secrecy wasn't to hide a lover. It was to protect a wound. A wound so deep, she didn't think I was strong enough to help her carry it. Or maybe she didn't want me to. Everything realigned in my mind. Every strange phone call, every distant look, every unexplained absence. They were puzzle pieces I had been forcing into the wrong picture. I had built a story of betrayal around her because it was easier. It was a story I could understand. Anger is simple. It is loud and hot, and it burns away the quiet, terrifying complexities of grief. The truth was infinitely more painful. She wasn't betraying me. She was trapped in a past I never even knew existed. And I, in my blindness, had been rattling the bars of her cage. I carefully placed everything back in the envelope, except for the sock. I kept the sock. I don't know why. Maybe I needed a tangible piece of my transgression. A reminder of the sacred place I had broken into. It felt impossibly light in my hand, but it carried the weight of a life. A life and a death. I had to assume it was a death. The grief that clung to her like a second skin. It was the grief of a mother. I drove home, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. But I wasn't seeing them. I was seeing the face of a boy I would never meet, and the face of the woman I was realizing I had never truly known. I knew what I had to do. I had to confess. But how? How do you admit to such a violation? I rehearsed speeches in my head, but they all sounded hollow. I decided on a different approach. Not with words, but with an action. An offering. I was going to give her back the piece of her past I had stolen. I thought it would be an act of peace. I was so wrong. It was an act of war. That night, she came home early. I was waiting for her, sitting in the darkness. She walked past me, a silent phantom, and went to the bedroom. I followed. I found her just as I knew I would, sitting on the edge of the bed, in the pale, sterile light of the moon, holding the wooden box. Her shoulders were shaking with silent sobs. The anger, the suspicion, it was all gone. All I felt was a profound, bottomless sorrow. For her, for the boy, and for us. For the man I had been, the man who would have simply walked to her, wrapped his arms around her, and asked, "What's wrong?" But I was not that man anymore. I was the man with a stolen key and a secret of his own. I didn't say a word. I walked to her, my footsteps like thunder in the silent room. I knelt in front of her. She didn't look up. Her gaze was fixed on the box in her lap. I slowly opened my hand, There, in my palm, lay the little blue sock, an offering, a confession, an apology, a violation. It was all of those things at once. She stopped crying. The air grew thick, heavy. Every sound in the world seemed to cease, waiting. Her gaze lifted from the box, slowly, hesitantly, not to my face, but to my outstretched hand. The sound she made wasn't a word. It was a sharp, broken gasp, the sound of a soul fracturing. She looked from the sock in my hand to my face, and the emptiness I had seen before was gone. It was replaced by something far, far worse. A raw, visceral look of betrayal. Not the betrayal of a wife caught in a lie, but the betrayal of a survivor whose most sacred sanctuary had been desecrated. I had not just uncovered her secret, I had stolen it. She flinched away from me, pulling the box tighter to her chest, as if I were a monster. And in that moment, I knew that I was. I expected tears. I expected yelling. I expected her to demand how I knew. Instead, I got something far more chilling. Silence. A long, dead silence. And then she began to speak. And the story she told wasn't an apology or an explanation. It was a verdict. A judgment on me and on our marriage, delivered in a voice I had never heard before. She began to speak. Her voice was a monotone, a dead, flat thing. She didn't look at me. She looked out the window, at a past only she could see. She told me about Leo. He was born when she was 19. The father, a boy she thought she loved, had vanished. She tried, she said. For 6 months, she tried to be a mother, a good mother. But she was alone and scared and drowning in a poverty and a loneliness she couldn't escape. She told me about a winter night, a fever that wouldn't break, and a hospital with lights that were too bright. He didn't make it to the morning. Sepsis, the doctor said. A common infection that had spiraled. A tragedy of circumstance. She told me all of this with no tears, her voice hollowed out by a grief so old it had become part of her bones. Tomorrow, she whispered, was the anniversary. The day she lost him. The day she packed away his few things. One sock in a box under her bed, the other in a post office box she rented every year. A private tomb she could visit without explanation. A place to grieve the part of her that died with him. I never told you, she said, her voice finally cracking. Because I didn't want to be that girl for you. The broken girl with the dead baby. I wanted to be whole. The truth was finally out. It lay between us in the darkness, a terrible, wounded thing. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her that I loved her, all of her, the broken parts most of all. I wanted to tell her that her grief could have been our grief, that she never had to carry it alone. But the words died in my throat, because the truth was poisoned by the way I had found it. I had not been a partner. I had been a spy. I had not offered comfort. I had committed an act of emotional burglary. She didn't tell me her secret because she didn't trust me to love her through it. and I had just proven her right. And as that realization settled, she moved. It wasn't a sudden movement, but a slow, deliberate one. An action that would perfectly bookend the entire affair. She was about to give me my answer, not to the question of her secret, but to the unasked question of what happens now. What happens to a love that has been shattered by suspicion? She finally looked at me. The betrayal was still there, but now it was glazed over with a cold, quiet resolution. She took the sock from my limp hand. Her fingers didn't touch mine. She placed it in the box with its partner, closed the lid, and the click was the sound of a door being locked forever. "The secret," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "wasn't the thing that would destroy us." She stood up, her back straight, her face a pale mask in the moonlight. She paused at the bedroom door and looked back at me. One last time. "Your suspicion was." She left. She didn't pack a suitcase. She just took her purse and the wooden box. I didn't try to stop her. What could I say? I watched from the window as she got into her car and drove away, disappearing into the gray, pre-dawn light. The house, which had held its breath when she was gone, now seemed to exhale a long, final sigh. The silence that rushed in to fill the space she left was absolute. It was no longer the silence of waiting. It was the silence of the end. I was alone with the truth, but the truth was no comfort. It was just a mirror, showing me the monster I had become. I stayed there on the floor for hours as the moon gave way to the weak, watery light of dawn. The name echoed in my head. Leo. A ghost I had helped resurrect, only to use him as a weapon against his own mother. I had been so obsessed with the idea of a rival, another man, that I never considered that the rival was a memory. A grief so profound, it had its own gravity. I hadn't been fighting for my marriage. I had been desecrating a grave. I had wanted to know the secret that was destroying my marriage. And now I knew. The secret was me. Days turned into a week. She didn't call. My texts went unanswered. I walked through the house, a ghost in my own right. Her clothes were still in the closet. Her perfume was on the vanity, but it was a stage set. The life had been ripped out of it. One day, I opened a drawer where she kept her sweaters. It was empty. She must have come back when I was at work. She hadn't taken everything, just enough to start again. And in the quiet, methodical removal of her things, there was a message more final than any goodbye. The silver key I had made sat on the counter, a monument to my failure. I thought about going back to the post office, opening the box again. Maybe she had left something for me. A note, an explanation, a final word. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. That box was her space, her sacred ground. I had violated it once. I couldn't do it again. The key was a reminder of the door I had forced open, and in doing so, closed the most important one of all, the door to her heart. It was now locked, and I was the one who had thrown away the key. I started walking. I would leave the house and just walk for hours, through neighborhoods I didn't know. I looked at the faces of strangers, couples holding hands, laughing, and I wondered about their secrets, the small hidden wounds they carried, the silent pacts they made to protect each other. Did they know how fragile it all was? How one thread of suspicion, pulled just right, could unravel everything. Love, I realized, isn't just about passion or companionship. It's an act of faith, a quiet promise to believe in the person next to you, especially when you're sitting in the dark. One night, I saw my reflection in a darkened shop window. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. His eyes were hollow, his face etched with a grief that was not his own, but one he had stolen. I had wanted so badly to protect our marriage from a secret, but I had become the secret, the ugly truth that lived in our home, the monster under the bed. I had been so afraid of losing her to another man that I never realized I was losing her to myself. Sometimes I can still feel the weight of it in my palm. The little blue sock. So small, so full of a story I had no right to read. I imagine her somewhere in a new apartment, a new life. I see her taking out the wooden box, opening it, the two socks lying side by side, a matched pair, a completed set, a circle of grief finally closed. But her healing, I know, came at the cost of my own destruction, a price I deserved to pay. Does she ever think of me? Or has she locked me away in a box far darker and deeper than the one she kept under our bed? Tonight, the rain is falling again. The house is holding its breath, but it's not waiting for her to come home. It's waiting for me to leave. The rooms are filled with the ghosts of 3 people now. Me, the woman I thought I knew, and the boy I never did. I destroyed my marriage, not with a bang, but with a whisper of doubt that grew into a roar of suspicion, drowning out everything else, drowning out the love that was trying so hard to stay afloat. I found the secret, and it set me free into a cold, empty loneliness of my own making. She wanted to be whole. That's what she said. And I, in my selfish fear, had focused only on the hole in our marriage, instead of the one in her heart. I saw her sorrow as a betrayal of our happiness, rather than a part of who she was. The greatest tragedy is not that she had a secret. The tragedy is that I made her feel like she had to keep it, that my love wasn't big enough to hold her past. And so I am left with one burning question that will haunt me for the rest of my days. If, on that first night, when I saw the void in her eyes, if I had not gone looking for a key, but had simply taken her hand, if I had not asked, "Where were you?" but had asked, "Are you okay?" If I had not treated her silence as an accusation, but as a cry for help. If I had chosen trust instead of suspicion, would her secret still have destroyed our marriage? Or would it have been the thing that finally saved us? Would sharing her deepest wound have been the very thing that made us truly whole? I'll never know. And that, I think, is my real punishment. To live forever in the echo of the question. To be haunted not by the secret she kept, but by the love I wasn't brave enough to give. What if you just asked? The night listens, and so did you. Thank you for being part of this confession. Don't let it fade into silence. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Another story awaits in the dark corners. Will you return?